Hi, I'm Lenora Bresler. Welcome to the March 14, 2017 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Well, yesterday we were talking about the tabernacle and how God created the offerings of the tabernacle in order to foreshadow Christ and his work. We talked specifically about the burnt offerings. Today I want to talk about another type of offering that was offered in the tabernacle out in the wilderness and then later in the temple of Jerusalem. And that is what was known as the grain offering. Now the grain offering was a voluntary offering that would be made, and you could make it in different ways. You could actually bring the actual flour itself, or you could bake it, or you could fry it. So there were different ways in which you could bring it, but however form you brought it before the Lord, there were some things that had to be true. One was that it had to be fine flour, meaning that the wheat had been beaten and crushed to the point that it was very, very fine, the finest quality. This reminds us, and it was a precursor to the Old Testament folks, that Christ, as the perfect sacrifice, would have to be literally beaten. And he was, figuratively as well as literally. He was literally beaten and broken in his sacrificial time on the cross. The offering, the grain offering, also had to be prepared with oil. Now, oil in the Bible is a representation of anointing, the anointing of God. And it's fascinating because if you think about the gospel stories, you know that the week of Christ's crucifixion, there was the story of the woman who broke the alabaster jar, the perfume, and the oil, and anointed Christ. And remember, Judas, who was the treasurer for the disciples, he was very upset and he criticized her and said that oil could have been used to feed the poor for a year. And Christ got after him and said, "What she's done is a lovely thing, for she's anointed my body for burial." So Christ would himself, in his physical form, be anointed with oil, just as the grain offerings were always full of oil. But there's more. The grain offerings had to have salt in them. Salt and no honey. Now, what is the point of that? Well, salt is a preservative. Honey, unfortunately, makes things go bad. And so in the Bible, salt is seen as the preservative. You may recall that we as Christians are told to be the salt of the earth, those that preserve the culture when it becomes very, very sinful. There's a final thing that had to be in this grain offering, and it's something you're very familiar with, although in a different context, and that is frankincense. There had to be frankincense in the grain offering. And here again, we know that frankincense was used by the priests in the worshiping for the Lord. The frankincense, it says in Exodus, is a sweet aroma to the Lord, going up as a free will offering. And we know that, of course, the Magi brought frankincense to the baby Jesus. So Jesus has been associated with frankincense literally since his birth, because his whole life was a beautiful aroma going up to his Father, God the Father. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Join me tomorrow for the next edition. I'm Lenora Bresler. Have a great day.